Today I'm covering the section in Chapter 6 called The Lessons of the Holy Spirit. I've already covered the introduction and part 1 of this section, and now I'm covering in this video part 2 of that section called To Have Peace, Teach Peace to Learn It. All who believe in separation have a basic fear of retaliation and abandonment. Okay, these are ego beliefs. They believe in attack and rejection. So that is what they perceive and teach and learn. These insane ideas are clearly the result of dissociation and projection. Okay, that's the ego. These are all ego beliefs and an ego perception. And this is where we are all operating from almost all the time, if not all the time. What you teach, you are. But it is quite apparent that you can teach wrongly and can, therefore, teach yourself wrong. This is what we've done when we've chosen the ego's thought system. We have taught ourselves wrong, and therefore we're teaching everyone else wrong. Many thought I was attacking them, even though it was apparent I was not. So this is Jesus saying that when he was alive here in this dream world in a body, many thought that he was attacking them because he was not believing the ego's thought system. Therefore, egos saw that as attack, even though it was apparent I was not, he says, because he was really teaching love. He was never attacking. An insane learner learns strange lessons, right? That's what egos do. What you must recognize is that when you do not share a thought system, you are weakening it. So when we believe in the ego's thought system, we are strengthening that thought system, and we are weakening Holy Spirit's thought system because we aren't teaching it, we aren't knowing it, and we aren't sharing it. And sharing happens with our beliefs. Those who believe in it, therefore, perceive this as an attack on them. This is because everyone identifies himself with his thought system, and every thought system centers on what you believe you are. If the center of the thought system is true, only truth extends from it. But if a lie is at its center, only deception proceeds from it. Okay, so if the center of our thought system is Holy Spirit, then it is true, and only truth extends from it. Then we would be teaching ourselves that we are spirit, and we would be teaching everyone else that they are spirit, because that is the thought system that we identify with. And he says, but if a lie is at its center, meaning the ego's thought system, only deception proceeds from it. So when we believe the ego's thought system, we are deceiving ourselves and everyone else, teaching us all that we are ego. That is a deception. All good teachers realize that only fundamental change will last, but they do not begin at that level. So the fundamental change is the change from ego's thought system to spirit's thought system. But we cannot begin at that level. That's too drastic of a change for us to make when we're so deeply asleep and so believing in the ego's thought system. Strengthening motivation for change is their first and foremost goal. So if we want to make changes, we have to feel motivated to do it. It is also their last and final one. Increasing motivation for change in the learner is all that a teacher need do to guarantee change. Change in motivation is a change of mind, and this will inevitably produce fundamental change because the mind is fundamental. Okay? So this whole course is constantly trying to teach us how to change our mind from identifying with ego to identifying with spirit. That is the fundamental change he is referring to. The first step in the reversal or undoing process, okay, that's the undoing of the ego, is the undoing of the getting concept. Okay, getting, giving. If we give, that means we're losing something, right? If I have 5 apples and I give 3 away, that means I only have 2. Okay, this is this whole getting thought system of the ego. Accordingly, the Holy Spirit's first lesson was to have, give all to all. I said that this is apt to increase conflict temporarily, and we can clarify this still further now. Okay, so to have give all to all means the opposite of the getting thought system, where if I have 5 apples and I give 3 away, I only have 2 left. This is a system of lack, this thought system. But in Spirit's thought system, when we give all, we have all. So in order to have all, meaning all the love, all the oneness, all the wholeness, we have to give it all to everyone because there's only one of us. Whatever we identify with is what we are teaching everyone else that they are. We're teaching ourselves and everyone else at the same time who and what we are, depending upon our belief system, ego or spirit, because there's only one of us and all minds are joined. So that's how we help each other to wake up. Not what we go around telling people in the dream world, not that, but which thought system we are identifying with within ourselves. So the reason when we adopt this thought system to have all, give all to all, he says, is apt to increase conflict temporarily is because as soon as the ego gets challenged with its thought system, it will cause conflict. The ego doesn't want to die. The ego doesn't want you to change your mind. The ego doesn't want to stop having power over you. The ego wants you to keep judging, keep perceiving separation. That's how it stays alive. So that's why it temporarily causes conflict when we begin to identify with Spirit's thought system, because the ego doesn't like it and it will fight back. But just know that that's just your ego having a temper tantrum because it doesn't want to die. And you will be much happier once you let it die because it is false. It is not really you. You are really spirit. You are really love. You are really wholeness and oneness. So all this separation nonsense and this judging and bodies that appear to decay and die, whether it be human bodies, plant bodies, animal bodies, even man-made things, no matter what it is, if it decays and dies, it's not real. It's of the ego world. What is real is eternal. That's spirit. At this point, the equality of having and being is not yet perceived. And he puts having and being in italics because he wants to emphasize that having and being in truth are really the same. But from the ego's perception, they're not the same. So this is why it's something that we need to learn. So until having and being are perceived as the same, until it is, he says, having appears to be the opposite of being, right? Because that's what the ego believes. Therefore, the first lesson seems to contain a contradiction, since it is being learned by a conflicted mind. So when our mind begins to have awareness of Spirit's thought system, it will still at the same time mostly be identified with the ego's thought system. So our mind will be perceiving 2 different thought systems, mostly ego, every once in a while when we remember Spirit's thought system. And the more we practice this course, the more we will remember to be in Spirit's thought system. It takes practice, got to build that muscle. And while we are bouncing back and forth between these 2 thought systems while we're in the process of awakening, we do have a conflicted mind. This means conflicting motivation, right? The motivation of the ego and the motivation of spirit. And so the lesson cannot be learned consistently as of yet, right? Because we're still confused, we're still conflicted. Further, the mind of the learner projects its own conflict and thus does not perceive consistency in the minds of others, making him suspicious of their motivation. So he's describing a little bit of what happens when we have a conflicted mind. We want to believe Spirit because deep inside we know that's who and what we really are. Deep inside we know that the ego is not our true home. That's why we seek teachings like this. This is why we are listening to the course, because some part of our mind does know truth and wants to awaken. But at the same time, the ego wants to stay alive and doesn't want us to awaken. So there's conflict. And when we believe we are ego, we're going to believe everyone else is ego and we're going to be suspicious of them. That's what he's talking about here. But it's okay. Be gentle with yourself. Forgive yourself. You're just learning. We are all learning. We are learning who and what we really are. And it takes a lot of practice. So in each now moment that you remember to forgive, which means overlooking the dream, overlooking the illusion, using your spiritual sight to see light and love everywhere, in everyone and everything, because that is all that really exists. The more you do that, and each now moment that you remember to do it, the stronger your belief in Spirit's thought system. So it just takes practice. That's why it's called practicing forgiveness. This is the real reason why, in many respects, the first lesson is the hardest to learn. Meaning, taking that very first step in identifying not with ego's thought system, but with Spirit's thought system. Still strongly aware of the ego in yourself and responding primarily to the ego in others, you are being taught to react to both, as if what you do believe is not true. So that's why it can feel really hard in the beginning, because a part of us knows our truth is Spirit. We want to identify with Spirit. We want to learn this course, but we're still mostly identified with ego. So we are conflicted. Our mind is conflicted when we begin this course, but that's okay. Upside down, as always, the ego perceives the first lesson as insane, right? Because the ego's thought system is completely upside down from the truth. So when ego first hears, hey, you don't exist, it thinks it's insane. I mean, how many people end up seeing me or any other course teachers on the internet and think that what they're saying is insane? Because to the ego, it sounds insane because it is completely upside down from what the ego believes. The ego's judgment here, as always, is predetermined by what it is. The fundamental change will still occur with the change of mind in the thinker, right? We are the chooser. This is where the fundamental change happens, with our choice of which thought system we are going to identify with. Meanwhile, the increasing clarity of the Holy Spirit's voice makes it impossible for the learner not to listen. Okay, so even when our mind is conflicted, because we're interested in hearing Holy Spirit, but we're mostly identified with ego, even though that's happening, that conflict, we are still drawn to Spirit. We still hear Holy Spirit's voice. We still want to listen. Once we ask for Holy Spirit to enter our mind, it will always come. Spirit will always be there to awaken us. So that's why he's saying the increasing clarity of the Holy Spirit's voice makes it impossible for the learner not to listen. So the more we identify with Spirit, the more we're going to hear Spirit's voice, and the more we will listen. That means more and more we are going to identify with Spirit's thought system. For a time then, he is receiving conflicting messages and accepting both. Okay, so this is all of us who are practicing this course. For a time, until we fully awaken, we are going to have a conflicted mind, and we're going to hear both voices. We're going to hear ego and we're going to hear Spirit. This is all of us who are working on this course. Okay, this is happening all the time for all of us. So we just need to remember that we are the chooser. And when we remember that we are the chooser, we can then choose differently if we have not chosen Spirit. The way out of conflict between two opposing thought systems is clearly to choose one and relinquish the other. So he's telling us it's pretty clear, choose Spirit and relinquish ego. If you identify with your thought system, and you cannot escape this, right? Because everyone has to choose a thought system. You've either chosen ego or Spirit. Those are the only two choices. And if you accept two thought systems, which are in complete disagreement, right? If we're accepting both ego and Spirit's thought system, which are in complete disagreement, peace of mind is impossible. Okay, so we have to choose one, and the only one that brings peace is Spirit. If you teach both ego's thought system and Spirit's thought system, which you will surely do as long as you accept both, you are teaching conflict and learning it. So as long as we're bouncing back and forth between ego and Spirit's thought system, we are learning conflict within ourselves, and we are teaching conflict to everyone else because we're confused about who we are and who everyone else is. So that's why in the process of awakening, we need to continuously keep choosing Spirit. We need to practice. So it becomes a new habit. Because right now our habit is to default to ego. So this is all about forming a new habit to default to spirit. And I have absolutely seen this change in myself over the years. Even just in this past year. I don't know how or why it happened, but I reached a new level, a new threshold where I just can't take the dream seriously anymore. My emotions are no longer invested in it. I can get tricked for maybe a minute or two, feeling bad or upset about something that appeared to happen, but very quickly, there's another part of my mind that chimes in, knows that I'm not at peace, and knows that it's a waste of time for me to be feeling not at peace because what I'm feeling upset about isn't even real. And it is a projection coming from my own mind that I put in my dream that is now reflecting back to me. And it's just my ego trying to get me to no longer have this new habit of identifying with spirit. So because I've been practicing forgiveness for so long, it is a habit. And now, within the past few months, something has flipped where my default is becoming knowing that I'm always in a dream. It's becoming a way of living within the world, but not of it. I'm certainly not at Jesus's level yet, but I'm getting there. And it's because I keep practicing, I keep choosing. And the motivation he's speaking about here is pain. I don't want to feel pain. Some people do. There's been times in the past where I wanted to feel pain because that's what was comfortable to me. That's what I knew. This is why we are all choosing ego because it's comfortable to us. We know pain. We know separation. We know judgment. These things are very familiar to us. But when you practice choosing spirit again and again and again and again, you are forming a new habit, and pain, separation, discomfort, judgment don't feel comfortable anymore. They don't feel good anymore. And that has happened to me. I have witnessed this in my own transformation, in my own awakening. And it wasn't because I forced it. It wasn't because I tried really hard to make it happen. It was a process of releasing ego. And as soon as I release ego, spirit just comes right in because that's who I already am. It's just waiting to come in, the light and the love. The problem is we're always blocking it with our ego thought system. With fear, we are blocking it. Yet you do want peace, he says, or you would not have called upon the voice for peace to help you. Its lesson is not insane. The conflict is. Right? So even though ego perceives Holy Spirit's thought system as insane, it's actually not. It's truth. So that's why he's saying the lesson is not insane. The conflict is. The conflict of not believing spirit and instead believing ego. That conflict, that is what is insane. There can be no conflict between sanity and insanity. Only one is true, and therefore only one is real. The ego tries to persuade you that it is up to you to decide which voice is true. But Holy Spirit teaches you that truth was created by God, and your decision cannot change it. Yes, because ego wants to believe it's God. It wants to believe that if it can get us to believe in it, that we can kill Holy Spirit, we can kill and destroy that entire thought system, and the ego can live forever because we will be trapped in its thought system. That is what it wants. So that's why the ego tries to persuade you that it's up to us to decide what is true or not. That is false. Nothing makes God not real. Nothing makes spirit not real. Just because ego wants to believe it doesn't make it real. So that's why he's saying that the Holy Spirit teaches you that the truth was created by God and your decision cannot change it. So that's where us as the decision maker comes in. We get to decide whether we're going to believe truth or a lie, if we're going to believe spirit or not. That is our power, not what our truth really is. That's not our power. Our truth is spirit. That will never change. But whether we believe it or not, identify with it or not, that is our power. And that is what Holy Spirit is trying to teach us, to use our power to choose our truth. And this brings peace. As you begin to realize the quiet power of the Holy Spirit's voice and its perfect consistency, It must dawn on your mind that you are trying to undo a decision that was irrevocably made for you. We are spirit. We are love. We are whole. We are oneness. And the ego is trying to undo that truth. But nothing the ego does can undo it. It's not possible. We can just ignore it. We can just fall asleep into a deep ego dream and not know our truth. And that is what we have done, or at least appear to have done, right? Because it's all an illusion. It didn't really happen. That is why I suggested before that you remind yourself to allow the Holy Spirit to decide for God for you. And that is what Jesus did. He was fully dedicated to God. He allowed Holy Spirit to decide for God for him. So that is why he was always deciding for God, that he was dedicated to God. And that's what he's teaching us to do in this course. You are not asked to make insane decisions, although you can think you are. It must, however, be insane to believe that it is up to you to decide what God's creations are. Yes, again, the ego is insane for thinking it is God, that it could destroy God, that it could make heaven go away. The Holy Spirit perceives the conflict exactly as it is. Therefore, his second lesson is, he puts in quotes, to have peace, teach peace, to learn it. So in order for us to feel peaceful, we want to see everyone and everything out in the world as peace. That means teaching peace. It doesn't mean what you say. It doesn't mean you have to go around telling people anything. It's just what you believe within yourself. So if you use your spiritual sight and you see peace, you see light, you see love everywhere, you are then teaching yourself and everyone else that you are love, that you are spirit. This is what he means by to have peace. Teach peace, to learn it. It means identifying with Spirit's thought system. This is still a preliminary step, since having and being are still not equated. Because as we're learning, as we're going through the process of practicing forgiveness and waking up, we have not yet equated having and being. We're just practicing. So that's why it's a preliminary step. It is, however, more advanced than the first step, which is really only the beginning of the thought reversal. The second step is a positive affirmation of what you want. What do we want? We want peace. This then is a step in the direction out of conflict, since it means that alternatives have been considered and one has been chosen as more desirable. This is when we choose peace, that peace is more desirable than conflict. Nevertheless, the term more desirable still implies that the desirable has degrees, which isn't true. Degrees is just an illusion. Therefore, although this step is essential for the ultimate decision, it is clearly not the final one. Lack of order of difficulty in miracles has not yet been accepted because nothing is difficult that is wholly desired. To desire wholly is to create. And creating cannot be difficult if God himself created you as a creator. So even though in truth there is no order of difficulty with miracles or with anything, there are no degrees. There's just this or that. There's just ego or spirit. Even though that's our truth, we don't totally know it yet. As he explained earlier in this section, that our mind is conflicted. So while we are still identifying with ego and slowly waking up out of the ego's illusory dream, there will appear to be degrees. And that's why there appear to be these steps that we take to make the final decision for God, where we never identify with ego again. It takes time because time is in the illusion. And so are the degrees, these steps that we're taking. All right. And it's okay to have that because we think we're here. We believe we're here. So we're going to use the tools of this dream, meaning degrees and steps and practicing and all these things. We're going to use those tools within our dream so that we can wake up out of the dream. And so when we desire wholly, it's because we are aligned with spirit and we know that God is our creator, that God created us, and that nothing else could possibly ever exist. The second step then is still perceptual, although it is a giant step forward in the unified perception that reflects God's knowing. So this is why we use the tool of perceiving within our dream. We are perceiving either ego's thought system or spirit's thought system. But perception is of the illusion. Perception doesn't exist within reality. Our reality is just love, is just light, extending eternally. But while we think we're here in this dream, we have to perceive with spirit's thought system so that we can appear to slowly wake up within the illusion. So as we keep practicing perceiving Holy Spirit's thought system, that is a tool that reflects God's knowledge back to us. As you take this step and hold this direction, you will be pushing toward the center of your thought system where the fundamental change will occur. So as we progress with these understandings, as we're practicing identifying with Spirit's thought system, we are making progress. And again, progress is of the illusion because it implies degrees. It's not real, but we appear to be making progress within our illusion as we perceive correctly, as we perceive spirit. And he's saying that the second step is easier than the first because it follows. So once we begin that first step of understanding that we have everything upside down and backwards, and we begin to perceive something other than the ego's thought system, that's the hardest step. That's the most difficult jump for our mind to make. But once we make that jump, and we do start to accept and understand that ego's thought system is not the truth and it is not the only way to perceive, then the second step of to have peace, teach peace, to learn it is a little bit easier because you already did the first step. Realizing that it must follow, meaning step 2 after step 1, is a demonstration of a growing awareness that the Holy Spirit will lead you on. All right, all fancy, beautiful words to mean just keep practicing choosing spirit. Spirit will take care of the rest for you. You do not need to do any heavy lifting. All you need to do is to change your perception whenever you remember to do it. And the motivation to do that, to change your perception, is pain, is non-peace. That is your motivation to choose again.